You are in possession of a limited supply of a life-saving drug. 6 people will die if they are not treated with it. Looking at this schematic, 1 patient requires the entire drug supply to survive. The 5 others require 1/5 each. You cannot save all 6. The default in medical ethics dictates a clear path. You give the drug to the 5. The logic behind this consensus relies on a seemingly unassailable premise. The death of 5 innocent people is considered a greater evil, a mathematically worse outcome than the death of 1 innocent person. In 1977, philosopher John M. Taurek published a paper challenging the exact mechanism of this moral math. Taurek presented a rigorous thesis. In trade-off situations involving independent human lives, the relative numbers of people involved have no intrinsic moral significance. A group of 5 people is not automatically entitled to a scarce resource simply by virtue of outnumbering a single person. To understand why, we have to examine the hidden assumptions of utilitarian accounting, deconstruct the concept of additive suffering, and prove exactly why treating human lives with genuine equal respect requires a coin flip, not a calculator. We test the initial premise by adjusting 1 variable in the triage scenario. Suppose the single individual requiring the full dose is a close friend named David, and the other 5 are strangers to you. As this perspective matrix shows, you are the resource holder. Your relationship maps a direct concern for David's well-being, while no such connection exists with the 5 strangers. In this scenario, it is morally permissible for you to give the entire supply to David. You are acting on a personal preference, but you are not acting immorally. Saving your friend violates no rights. The strangers possess no legitimate claim, no pre-existing right to your drug. We can push this test of perspective further. Imagine the drug does not belong to you, but belongs entirely to David, and it is his required dosage to survive. The resource is his. Would anyone argue that David is morally required to give up his drug and his life so that the 5 strangers might continue to live? David acts to preserve his own life because it is, understandably, more important to him. For David, his death is the worse outcome. He evaluates the loss from his own personal perspective, and he is under no moral obligation to surrender his survival. The friction arises when third-party observers interject. Critics insist that regardless of personal preferences, from an entirely objective, impersonal perspective, 5 deaths must constitute a worse thing, period. Taurek rejects this classification. He argues there is no such thing as an impersonal worse thing. Loss only registers a negative value relative to the individual experiencing it. Evaluating human lives from a detached mathematical viewpoint strips away the actual context in which pain and death are felt. This brings us to the core error driving utilitarian triage, the core belief that individual instances of pain and loss can be aggregated or summed up across different physical bodies. Consider a scenario involving differential pain. You can either spare 50 people from experiencing minor headaches, or you can spare 1 person from suffering a severe migraine. You wouldn't ask 1 person to endure an agonizing migraine to save 50 from minor discomfort. The math fails because subjective experiences do not compile. You cannot add 50 minor discomforts together to outweigh the intense suffering of 1. We must apply this exact restriction on additive logic to the lethal triage scenario. The loss of a life is a total and absolute event to the individual losing it. Because human suffering is not additive in this way, the collective deaths of 5 people do not add up to an experience of loss 5 times greater than the loss suffered by the single individual. Attempting to weigh the sum of 5 distinct lives against the value of 1 independent life is a severe category error. Adding up separate pains requires treating human experiences like abstract currency sitting in a bank vault, rather than absolute events occurring to distinct individuals. Human suffering does not aggregate across bodies. Therefore, the mathematics of utilitarian optimization are entirely structurally unsound when deployed to calculate the value of individual human lives. If we accept that relative numbers do not grant moral priority, we are left with a practical dilemma. How do we allocate the drug without our decision being entirely arbitrary? We cannot do nothing while all 6 die. We have a duty to act, but we have a duty to act fairly. Taurek's mechanism for maintaining equal concern and respect for all 6 individuals relies on probability. You flip a coin. This diagram illustrates the resulting probability distribution. The odds map evenly, half to the 1, half to the 5. The mechanics are straightforward. Heads, you administer the drug to the 5. Tails, you give it to the 1. The philosophical justification for this policy is that it grants each individual person involved an identical 50% chance of survival. This method actively refuses to devalue the life of the single person. It acknowledges their total potential loss rather than discounting them simply because they face death without companions. True equal respect is not achieved by maximizing the final surviving headcount. It is achieved by affording every single individual an equal mathematical probability of being saved. There is one primary objection to this framework, often raised by professionals constrained by public duty. A volcanic eruption threatens an island. A large number of citizens are trapped on the north end, while a small handful await rescue on the south end. The Coast Guard has one evacuation ship. Almost anyone assessing this situation agrees the captain is duty-bound to direct his ship to the north end straight away. No coin flip is required. Does this scenario prove that relative numbers actually do dictate our moral duties? No. The contradiction is resolved by separating the concept of intrinsic moral value from the obligations of a mutual contract. The Coast Guard ship is a collectively owned resource. Its deployment is governed by an ex-ante agreement, a prior policy established by the citizens. That policy was designed in advance to maximize each individual taxpayer's statistical chance of rescue in the event of an emergency. The ship goes north to honor that mutual agreement, not because the larger group possesses a higher inherent moral weight. This public duty operates on entirely different parameters than a private citizen dispensing their own drug, where no prior mutual contract binds the parties. The mandate to count the numbers is a function of specific policy design and shared investment. Outside of those institutional contracts, calculating human lives as fractions of an aggregate whole fails to respect the absolute, non-additive reality of the individual human experience.